Hello, and welcome to another one of our regular Tuesday sessions for the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we discuss essays by the great writer Ayn Rand. And today we're doing Ayn Rand's 1969 essay, Apollo 11. We are privileged today, and I am particularly fortunate today, to be joined by a real scientist, a trained astronomer, and a well-known science writer, Dr. Amanda Maxham. She got her PhD at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas, where she also taught astronomy and physics. She's been published in scientific journals on those subjects beyond my ken, but she's probably more well known to us laymen for her popular podcasts, interviews, and writings on all manner of scientific subjects related to government policy, from GMOs to DDT and various other environmental issues. She's been associated with some well-known think tanks, such as the Heartland Institute and the Ayn Rand Institute. So I'm particularly privileged to have her today. And to just give a little background on this essay, Ayn Rand was among the selected VIPs in 1969 to actually attend the launching of Apollo 11, the Apollo mission that actually put human beings on the moon for the first time in human history. And it is one of Ayn Rand's most literary and inspirational nonfiction works. She was there in the audience. She describes her witnessing of the launch, her whole experience there, and then she discusses the reaction both by the American people and by intellectuals at the time. I'd add just one final note. By the end, the essay was published the same year as that amazing summer of 1969, where Americans and the rest of the world held their breath to see that if we can in fact put human beings on the moon. Within a year, one of the three astronauts involved in the mission, Michael Collins, actually wrote Ayn Rand to tell her that he thought it was probably the best article written on the subject since he'd gotten back from the moon. And Ayn Rand wrote back. They called one another Mike and Ayn and became friendly. So her essay had a certain impact even at the time. But as an opening question, there are really two areas I'd like to talk with Dr. Maxim about. First, the scientific and engineering achievement that it was, but also, has the culture changed with respect to its admiration for reason and science? Or has it gotten worse or better since then, particularly with regard to space exploration and other governmental scientific issues? So, Dr. Maxim,
Yeah.
Ayn Rand says in the course of this that really it was mostly the cashing in on scientific and engineering achievements that had already occurred, not to take away, she stressed very clearly, the courage and the skill of the astronauts and the engineers and the dozens and dozens of specific engineering problems that had to be solved in order to get us to the moon, even though even rocket technology had been developing. Well, in the 20s, Goddard invented the rocket. The Nazis developed it into a terrible V2 rocket that did so much damage in England. And by the 1950s, ICBMs were under research by the great powers. So it was really an application of mostly existing technology. Is that correct?
I mean, I guess so. I'm not, yeah, I guess when I read this essay, that type of thing isn't the foremost of, it's not the top of my mind. So it's true that there is like tons of technology that went into this, and maybe this is just the next step. Although it's a huge achievement to build the rocket, to program the computer to make sure that people are safe when they're up there in space, and to finally land on the moon and then to come back. I mean, it's a huge achievement. But when I read this essay, that isn't, I guess, the most exciting thing about it. It's more to the latter of what you're talking about, that it's an element of spiritual fuel that I get from it. So I know in the essay, Ayn Rand compares it to something like watching the rocket launch is like, in some way looking at a piece of art. I remember the first time that somebody, an objectivist, told me like what the meaning of art, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, we had this objectivist club meeting, and his name is Eric Daniels. I don't know if you know him, but
Yeah.
he told me we all had brought in our favorite piece of art to the meeting, and he was like, this represents you. This is what you think about life. And I thought, really, that can't be true, but it is true. It's like, I look at the painting, and it's there. It's concrete. It puts all the abstractions of like what it means to live life, and the things that I love about life. It's right there in front of your face, and that's what the space flight meant. It's this. I see it so clearly, and it gives you spiritual fuel. So
As though we needed to put a human being. I mean, we could put our robots on the moon, and we're still generations probably away from making the moon, much less Mars, a habitable place. So for Ayn Rand, it was a metaphysical experience in the way she describes art. Ayn Rand defines art as the concretization of a metaphysical abstraction, and that's the source of the emotional fuel that it gives us. It allows us to see in perceptual terms and react in emotional terms to the abstract. And here she says a real live event does that. And very much not taking away from what the achievement was, she focuses on what it took, the dedicated conviction in the power of reason, in science, the absolutism of reality, the precision that it took to work this, to do something that human beings had never done before. And so she describes it in effect as the world watching a play with a single theme, the efficacy of the human mind as its theme.
Yeah, and it's a super dramatic play too. It's not just like, something going on the stage. It's a rocket. There's fire coming out of the end of it. It's like
dramatic, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're harnessing nature, and you see it, and that's, I mean, you can't make it more concrete, like, and more exciting and more dramatic than that. So when Rosie asked me to come on this show, I thought, oh man, I don't know if I want to. It's been a long time since I've read this essay, but I decided to do it because this essay brings together, I think of it's like the trifecta for me of like three of my really most favorite things. One is that this is Ayn Rand being like an investigative journalist, right? So she's there reporting on what she's seeing. She's part of the action, and is that she's one of the players in the essay, which is really interesting. And she's directing your focus around. And I love investigative journalism. I love reading articles by people going to interesting places and are talking about interesting things. And I always think, even when I read someone who's a very powerful writer, it's like, man, but if you only just, I don't know, saw the world in more of a way that I do, how amazing would it be for you to direct your power there, and for you to, to elevate me when I'm reading your stuff, rather than just me seeing like what a master craftsman you are with your writing. So that's one thing that I love about this, is that I get to see her doing all of the things that journalists do, right? The descriptions of people and the scene, and how did it feel to be there, and what she did, and the reactions of people around her. And then the second thing is it's about space, which I love. And you asked a question earlier about where are we heading in terms of the culture. I don't know. So I'm not a philosopher. I want to disarm. I think rule number one is disarm your audience, right? Just say, I'm a scientist. I've thought some about culture related to science. But in terms of me making some, deep connections here, I don't know that I'll be able to. But one of the things that I have noticed is that I love how commonplace this space exploration is today. Like tonight, there's going to be a SpaceX launch. And here in California, I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to see, them. I think they're launching like a NASA defense system or something tonight. And I'll be able to see that up in the sky and have my own small part of that moment of seeing human efficacy just, concretely displayed for me. And I'm a space nerd. I love space. I love stories about space. I watch Star Trek like all the time. Uh, and and so that's the second thing that I love about this essay. And the third is that it's Ayn Rand. You know, she's also a hero of mine, and to see her direct her attention and focus to this event and to put it down on paper for me, man, it's the trifecta of the three things that I love. So that's why it's my favorite and why I wanted to talk to you about it today.
Wow, that's really cool. And I have to say, you know, uh, it is the aesthetics that Ayn Rand is focused on. And she points out that for the American people at the time, it was an inspirational, emotional, as I say, shared. And it's strange that our arch individualist Ayn Rand, always accused of being a rugged individualist or an atomist individualist, she's really focused on this shared metaphysical experience, the shared values that ordinary people had, the crowds that came there spontaneously who weren't invited from all over, and the popular reaction. But
Yeah, she
she,
calls it like a benevolent flood of people or something, right?
right, right, there
It's
to
awesome.
witness a moral code enacted in space because of all the virtues, from her perspective, rationality, integrity, consistency, productiveness, that are required to pull this off. But this is where you might be of some particular help to us here.
Sure.
You have written in recent years about scientific issues and government policy, and how, for example, policies against GMOs are actually anti-science policies. And in regard to the space issues that are going on today, you've got, space. You've got Elon Musk. You've got the guy behind, Virgin Airlines. You got private players now in the space program, but there's still all kinds of, whether or not it's government funded, you still have all kinds of people criticizing, even billionaires spending their own money on going into space. Do you think that, and I wonder if you could give us some help here on this, do you think that our culture has gotten any better with regard to the sorts of issues that Ayn Rand was talking about? So many commentators at the time pointed out, well, we haven't been able to cure poverty or the problems in the ghettos, and until we do that, spending this money seems to be a waste of time on just symbolically putting people on the moon.
People still say that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, like making those big picture, has the culture shifted better or worse? I don't know. What I can say is that there seems to be only like three areas of life where people still get really like gleefully like really excited about human achievement. And those are the areas that, yeah, it's like they're these little oases where you get to go there, and for the moments while you're watching or listening to a commentator, just much like Ayn Rand describes in this essay, you get to see this delight in people when they're talking about it. And those areas, one is space exploration. Like, if you ever watched the SpaceX channel, yeah. So if anyone's listening and hasn't, do it. There's this, yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do, is to watch the launches and to hear the commentators. There's this girl on the SpaceX channel that I really love because she talks with intelligence and authority about what's happening with the rocket, the details of what's going on now and what's happening next and next. And then at the end of the launch, when the astronauts made it safely up into space, she cried. And it's just so perfect. It's like, I wish I was there. I wish I was that person in that moment that got to experience it so like firsthand and close up. Yeah, so there are still these, I don't know, glimmers of it that burn through. And one of them is in this category of space exploration. Like, it's hard not to get excited about it. It's just, they're huge. Rockets are big and they're exciting and they blast off, and we're going to space, and it's like, wow, that seems like an impossible problem, yet we've solved it. The drama is there, and people still get caught up in how cool and exciting it is. And yeah, I still think I see it, the same naysayers that are, yeah, why are we spending money on this? And isn't Elon Musk such a jerk for, I don't know, whatever they say, that I tend to ignore. But it's, yeah, those people are still there. And then I said there are three areas where people are still experience, or you can experience this kind of delight about that humans are great, and how cool is it to see them do amazing things. Another area is sports. Sometimes you can see that where people are, although I mean that's more physical in a way than like launching a rocket. It's more clear, like, yeah, there's a lot of thinking and reasoning involved, and that's less clear with sports, but people still get excited about achievement and greatness in that regard. And the third is with children, where it's, you still wish, yeah, people see a child doing something and they look at that as a positive thing. It's like, let's watch them do something amazing. So if you're looking for like these places where you can rest and take a, I don't know, what do you do at an oasis?
Right.
A nice deep drink of water. Those are places where you can still find it.
Right. So the American sense of life isn't completely gone, which is, I guess, a good thing. And it is, apart from a great work of art, these kind of metaphysical moments, these metaphysical experiences where you can experience human competence and achievement, like in sports, very much so, or a child accomplishing something. You're absolutely right. And something unique is the space program, where it's focused specifically on rationality and precision. It's really a testament, as you say, even more in a sense than sports is, to a testament to the human mind and its power, its remarkable power, as Ayn Rand says. And so she focuses on it as a group metaphysical experience at the time that the American people shared. Absolutely fat. And if you think about it, it's, in terms of human history, it distinguishes human beings from every other creature on the earth. It focuses on the unique power of reason, and in not just historical terms, basically biological or anthropological terms, it's an astonishing moment in the history of life on Earth that a critter from Earth should be able to get to the moon and walk around and drive jeeps, plant a flag, play golf. It is absolutely astonishing, really, the power of the human mind and how it's so eloquently demonstrated by this.
Yeah. I have kind of a smaller window on the culture, in that I talk with a lot of students about space and try to talk to them about how they think and feel about space travel and that kind of thing. One of the things in this essay is that Ayn Rand says something about when you look at the space launch, at the rocket launch, and you think those are humans, and the word human for once means grandeur.
Sure.
Yeah. And it makes you feel great just to observe it. One of the first things I start off in an astronomy class with is we talk about the scale of space, like where are you and when are you in terms of space and time. And I start with looking at a park bench and then zooming out by 10 times. And it doesn't take very many steps before you're in the middle of nowhere with nothing surrounding you. And I think just 13 steps at least, you can get all the way out to everything in the whole universe. And
galaxy, you can go from a park bench to all the galaxies in a Powers of 10 pullout.
Yes.
With only 13 or so steps.
Yeah, maybe Powers of 10.
Amazing. Just amazing, though.
Grab my astronomy book here. But so one of the things that students say that this makes them feel like is that it makes them feel kind of creepy and like that they're a speck. I'll take a line from Bill Nye the Science Guy, who I don't like so much anymore, but he said it makes you feel like a speck floating on a speck in the middle of specklessness. And that is, trying to see if these are steps of 10 or 100 here. That is how students often view it, is that it makes them feel small and insignificant. And I think there's something really sad in that, where it's, because it doesn't make me feel small and insignificant. It makes me feel like, great, like the most important thing in the universe. It makes me feel huge, like my thoughts and my feelings can span that far, where I can understand a place that I've never been, and can never even like really hope to be. Like I have some sort of superhuman extrasensory perception, right? And that perception is it's reason and it's science and it's putting the pieces together at a high level. And that makes me feel huge.
Wow, what a
And it always,
fantastic perspective. Rather than feeling so small compared to the enormity of the universe, it's actually a testament to how large the mind can go and explain. The fact that we've come to understand the galaxy and then more galaxies beyond that is
yeah,
actually a testament to our ability to understand and get a handle on such vastness.
yeah. So it always makes me a little sad when students say it makes them feel small. Um,
Right,
because
just the
I would
opposite.
hope it would feel the opposite, or
Right.
maybe that I can help to disabuse them of that thought.
Well, and of course, I've always wondered why it didn't work the other way around. Why it is that, our discovery of the parts of an atom and subatomic particles doesn't make us feel really, really huge. I mean, I'm awfully big compared to an atom.
True that, James.
But really, you're absolutely right. It focuses on the uniqueness of our species, doesn't it?
Mhm.
The uniqueness of our species in being able to discover both the scales of things and how to make the world actually a safe. One of the wonderful lines in this is Ayn Rand says, "Isn't it amazing what humans can do with their mind and how safe it is, the world is when we can do that?" It's a sort of control of nature that we've achieved that no other biological organism has on this planet.
True. Yeah, for sure. We've been able to harness the power of nature. It's like, we get to ride the horse anywhere we want to take it. And it's only limited by our what we know, what we can figure out, and by our own imagination, really.
Sometimes with a certain amount of justification, our friends on the political left will criticize the right for being, quote, anti-science. They'll associate their ideas with religious ideas, which conservatives will most frequently use to defend their position. But also, the left has been not so pro-science in recent years. And I guess you could see some rumblings of it here with the criticism. But GMOs are outright criticized by the left. So many science, so much of real science is actually resisted by the left when it comes to applying it to real human life. And I wonder if you could comment. I guess that's what I'm fishing around. I wonder if you could
Yeah.
comment on that aspect.
Probably not. I mean, so like that is seems deep into politics and like what's the difference between people on the right and the left. What I can say is that yeah, the way people use the word science in general, I mean, it's hard to disagree with it, right? It's like, yeah, we all love science. We're all pro science, right? And it's kind of like, of course, but then that's about where it ends. It's, well, what does that really actually mean? So, I mean, one thing I will say is that one of the things that I like to teach my students is how to think like a scientist. So you've disappeared. This is okay. I'm about to make a really boring point.
Oh no, I'm still here.
Okay. All right. So one of the things I want to teach my students is how to think like a scientist.
Right.
Because that's not, you get a lot of students in your physics or astronomy classes, and are they going to be physicists or astronomers? No. But so there's a real question of like, why are you here? What's the point of taking a science class? And I'm sensitive to that, and I wanted to give them value, even though the specifics of the content isn't something that's long term necessarily going to be useful to them. And that's where the value is that you're being able to think like a scientist is something that you can apply no matter what you choose to do in your life. And that is a serious thing. It's not on the level of course, we're all, we're pro science. And then I can, insert whatever rationalization I have after that point, right? I am living here in reality. And if I want to have the best chance of having a great and awesome life, I need to harness my mind, or like to think rationally about what's around me. And so I need to know what's real and what's not real. And I need a systematic way to figure that out. And that is the scientific method. Neil deGrasse Tyson put it the way that I like best. And now I hope I don't slaughter it. The scientific method is doing, he says, the scientific method is doing whatever it takes. And he says that twice, whatever it takes to make sure that you don't believe something is true when it's actually false, and that you aren't fooled into thinking something is false when it's actually true. I don't know. I probably just slaughtered that. And that's part of it. It's that I want to make sure that what I have, what I'm taking into my mind and calling knowledge, is true. Because if it's not, it's ultimately not useful to me or possibly harmful to me. And it's, that's important for me to function and to live a good life. And I see that's only part of the scientific method, because the thing that it doesn't capture is not that I want to go around and to make sure that I'm not being fooled all the time. It's that I want to make something positive, right? And to discover, and it takes putting things together. And if I have a way to do that, I'm going to be better off. So I think there's, generally people say they love science, but don't really understand what kind of a perspective a scientist would have on the world, or like what it means to think like a scientist. And the more that you can do in that regard, no matter what your career, what you choose to direct your attention towards, the better off that you're going to be. And so that, when I was teaching, was my mission, is to help students to figure out, number one, how does the scientist think? And can you adopt that in your life as much as possible?
Oh wow, what a wonderful benevolent lesson that is, in terms of training a mind to look at evidence and logic and in a rigorous way, so that we can be careful about what we know to be true being true. And so in a sense, it's like a beautiful example of epistemology, and proper epistemology in action when done right. Very,
Yeah.
very impressive.
Because what are you going to do when you encounter a problem you've never seen before?
Right.
Are you going to run off and say, I don't know how to solve it?
Right.
I haven't seen an example like this. Or are you going to develop the confidence to say, yeah, I've got a shot at this. I've got the tools. I've I've opened my toolbox many, many times. I'm familiar with what's inside, and I'm going to be able to find the right thing, the right tool, the right method of thinking, the right systematic approach, the right way to gather evidence, the right way to know, to have the confidence to know when the conclusion I've come to is true, or false, or when it's likely to be true or false. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. And more than that, Apollo 11 is acting on what was, before anyone had ever gotten to the moon, a bunch of theoretical science and engineering problems that were being solved for the first time. So it's a demonstration in the confidence of reason, not, a lot science, people, like you say, are generally pro-science, but a lot of the achievements of science are specific to a field or a specific question, or even if it gets to the point where it cures a disease and people can say, wow, it's cured the disease. The space program was different than that. It gave everyone sort of a collective theater in not only the power of, but the power of the confidence of acting on that knowledge that can be successful.
Yeah, I love that confidence. It's very important, because it still takes that step of courage. I often used, when I was talking about GMOs, I'd use this example of Benjamin Franklin inventing the lightning rod. And when he Benjamin Franklin, he's so cool. Okay, so first of all, he discovers that lightning is an electrical phenomenon, and it's kind of like a space launch, right? He goes out in a storm, puts a kite up, luckily he doesn't electrocute himself, And
It took some guts.
yeah, no kidding. And but
I wouldn't fly a kite in an electric storm.
that makes him cool.
Right.
But then what he does with that is like months later, not like years later, or I'll get to it someday, months later, he invents a lightning rod. It's like, I get it now. Lightning is electrical. It kills people, starts fires. People die of electrocution. Let's make it safe. And he invents a lightning rod. And you'd think then at that point, it'd be like, oh yeah, it makes sense. He's figured it out. He can show you the demonstration. He knows. But people took a really long time adopting that lightning rod. And it takes courage and confidence, like you're saying, even when you know something is true, and you think you're right, to actually do it. People were afraid to put these things up on their houses because they worried, lightning is they saw it as a symbol of God's wrath, right? And if you interfere, then what's going to happen to you, right? It could be disastrous.
Get hit by lightning because you're interfering with God's plan about where lightning should hit.
And it's it's funny now, right? Because why wouldn't you put a lightning rod up? It's obviously it's going to be better, but back then there's a real question. We don't know the answer to that. Is it better to go against God and to have this impious interference, or to save your own life? Do you understand what the lightning rod does and how it works?
Through the 19th century, just from as a historian, the historicals, through the 19th century, the Catholic Church, for example, opposed vaccines, the smallpox vaccine and the other new vaccines that were coming online in the 19th century because it interfered with God's plan. In the same way, they object to birth control pills as interfering with God's plan. So it's common to see that kind of attitude from the church, but it was withering away during the Enlightenment and the age of science. Ayn Rand makes a really interesting point that the theme of Atlas Shrugged, the role of the mind in human life and survival, really couldn't have occurred to her, she thought, before the Industrial Revolution, before the Enlightenment and the Age of Science, because things like the lightning rod and Newtonian mechanics were suddenly giving people not only knowledge, but powerful knowledge that affected ordinary people's lives. And what's so wonderful about the Apollo mission is that it sort of encapsulates the power of the mind and the efficacy of the mind in one beautiful, dramatic example that everyone could witness.
Yeah, it's like art in that way. I said before, it's you see it, it's immediate, it's concrete. And I love the part where Ayn Rand says that she's in the bleachers and suddenly she finds herself sort of involuntarily standing and waving at the rocket.
Yeah. And people were waving and applauding because she said, the implication is, of course, the people on the rocket or at the Space Center can't hear you applauding, but still everybody needed to do something physical because they had to physically act it out. Yeah. It's that aspect of the shared metaphysical experience that I find interesting from this individualist writer who is so, often called this atomistic individualist, but she could be caught up in the shared emotional experience that other Americans were having. That's really fascinating to me. And like you, she does not focus. You'd have thought Ayn Rand, some people might have thought, Ayn Rand would have focused on the politics of it. But like you, she's not at all. She's focused on the metaphysical import of this event, the historical impact, the aesthetic impact of this event on the human spirit.
Yeah, I have to say, so I agreed to do this interview and I thought, I better read the essay, right? And I was a little worried that I wouldn't be able to get through it because it takes me a really long time to read things because I'll get caught up in like either the details of how it's put together or I'll have to go, it reminds me of something, I have to go look it up. I got a little bit bored in the middle part where she's talking more about politics. I don't know if I kind of forgot about that part.
Well, she has to go out of her way to say, look, this is a great thing as an aesthetic thing. What I find interesting is that it's not some practical government program that will, fix the public sewers or even feed the poor. I mean, to her, it's in fact is what the way she concludes it is: if you're going to spend money in a mixed economy, direct resources towards some kind of science, well, better to have a flag on the moon or Mars as a tribute to America, and even in this mixed economy, than some altruist or some coercive scheme that the government is normally known for. So it
Yeah,
is
it's
a
like
throwaway for her. To
throw
her,
it,
it's the
throw the
relevant.
money down the sewer, put it, where it makes no difference. They don't even necessarily want it to make a difference, because what are we going to be without poor people to have to, pander to and lift? I'm speaking a little bit out of my purview, but yeah, if there's a flag on the moon that says we were there, that's where, put the money there. If you're going to take it and do something with it, put a flag on the moon. Because at least in the future, when, I don't know, some other civilization comes along that's better and more rational than ours, they'll see that we did it. We were capable of it. And that's inspiring. It's spiritual fuel. It's not like the opposite, which is this like black hole that otherwise government throws money into. It's like a gaping void.
Right.
Chuck it in there.
Right.
No, we sent a rocket into space. That's awesome.
Exactly. Well, Dylan, do we have any questions that have come in? Dylan?
Sorry about that.
That's quite all right.
Okay. So we have a super chat from Mrs. Amy. She says, "This is a lovely discussion. Thank you." And then a super chat from Bonnie. She says, "The facts of reality are that man's mind is an amazing and good thing, even though it's capable of error. What basic error keeps so many from appreciating that?"
Oh man. Wait, what basic error keeps people from appreciating it? I don't know, maybe you can tackle that, James. That sounds like a philosophical question to me.
Well, it does come down to the assault on reason. That the astonishing thing is that as the Enlightenment was making astonishing headway in science. We were just mentioning Isaac Newton and Ben Franklin, and in the next century, Darwin's discoveries and the technological breakthroughs that would happen through the 19th century. That at this very period of Enlightenment and then Industrial Revolution, there were intellectuals. There was a counter movement, if you will, against reason. David Hume, the arch empiricist, he called himself, actually undermined confidence in the human mind by undermining concepts like causality, which of course lie at the heart of science. Still worse than David Hume, of course, is the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who developed a very sophisticated argument indicating why it is that human beings' own method of means of perception are the way we look at the world itself. Our eyes are what make us blind, in effect. And so using a very, very sophisticated argument that any means of perception would be distortion and cut us off from perception, in effect, of reality, has had a terrible, terrible impact. And philosophers since Kant have picked up on that. And by the 20th century, the idea that human beings really couldn't know by means of reason had taken hold. And so even as human beings are doing incredible things in the 20th century, like splitting atoms or changing the molecules of life to create new species, or walking on the moon, even as human beings were doing the most astonishing things, demonstrating the power of rational thought, Ironically, through the course of that, so much of our culture was becoming increasingly insecure about the power of the mind and overtly irrational And to this, I think Amanda would be better than myself, but even in science, to some degree, that was happening. The way many scientists interpreted, for example, the findings in quantum mechanics and things like that, even scientists were beginning to be affected by these Kantian arguments against reason. But I think the answer is in philosophy. The science and technology was during this very period demonstrating the power of reason in very dramatic ways. Apollo 11 was one of those ways. And yet, our actual confidence in reason and the power of reason was being undercut by so many intellectuals, philosophers, artists, but even it was starting even to affect scientists in our time.
Yeah, well, they're part of the culture, so I'm not surprised that it would infect their thinking as well. I'll take it in a more personal way. So it's about a fundamental error that. So if you imagine yourself, or if I imagine myself watching a moon launch, like say I'm watching SpaceX TV, and I'm not feeling that I don't know, that joy or that pleasure in watching people achieve something great, what would be my fundamental error? And I think it would be that I'd lost the benevolent attitude towards life. Yeah, I love that word attitude because it's also a scientific word in rockets, right? And attitude is how the angle that you're pointed up above the ground, right? And if you have a positive attitude, it means that you're pointed up, you're heading
up.
If you have a
Great.
negative attitude, you're headed
Right.
downwards. And I hope you've got enough space to change course before you crash. But
Hopefully.
yeah, if I was watching something and was kind of failing to find it inspirational any longer, I think that would be my error, is that I'm somehow no longer thinking of life as a place for me to play, as a playground where I can just explore and discover. And maybe I don't think that either I'm capable of greatness, or that mankind in general is capable of greatness. And that's the thought I would push on. And maybe space exploration and space flight isn't your thing, which is fine. But there's got to be something that gives you that spark of, wow, isn't it so cool that people can do that? And science is full of it, but there's other things as well. Like you're looking at a beautiful, painting. Like, how could someone have made that? Or any like a car, like a nice car, or a $50 bill. Smell a $50 bill and just see if that doesn't turn your attitude around a little bit.
I can be blown away just in the kitchen with the kinds of pots and pans and microwave ovens and things that we have just in the ordinary American kitchen are somewhat mind-blowing if you think about, for example, how they make simple utensils these days, or the materials in which they make no-stick pans, and the whole microwave oven idea, just completely, even our kitchen. But you're right, and one of the cool things that Ayn Rand notes in this is that, of course, around the Space Center in Florida where this happened, a lot of the employees around there obviously worked at the Space Center and were scientists and engineers and so forth. And the home in which Ayn Rand and her husband Frank O'Connor stayed for the duration of this was a local home of scientists who worked at the Space Center and the family. And she noted something about the clean, honest, simple precision of and the simple, quiet confidence of the people in that family who were surrounded by the atmosphere of science. And I can say from personal autobiography, I was the son of a computer engineer and scientist, and he, more than anyone, taught me math and science. And being raised in an environment that respects science and where it respects the absolutism of reality and the human need to submit to the facts in order to understand it or gain any control over reality, makes a huge difference. To see it, when I was a child, I could ask my dad, why is the sky blue? And, he'd ask me, why do you think it? But then he'd proceed to explain light reflect. He'd show me the sunset and we'd watch the sunset go through so he could explain how light travels through the atmosphere and how that mostly explains it. And the difference that made for the development of my own confidence in the power of reason was everything. And it is things like this, Apollo 11, or scientific achievements in general, like I say, even as ordinary as in the kitchen, that can be just inspiring. It's almost as though the microwave oven is an aesthetic experience for me too.
Yeah, I like to, either imagine myself coming from the past and seeing all the cool things that are around me. I mean, my mind would be blown away by all the cool stuff. Yeah.
They might be superstitiously afraid. They might be in religious awe, but hopefully they could catch up and understand that it's just a natural power of the human mind to understand reality.
If I met someone from the past, I would take them, someone who traveled to the future, I'd take them to Costco.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's something true about what you're saying, is that if you, I love scientists, I love nerds. They're so cool in that regard, because they get this feeling of capability about themselves. And you can get that. It's not just scientists. People can get that in lots of ways. But yeah, when you meet someone that knows how to build things, you actually can do it. There's that nexus between, I have this idea in my head and I can make it happen. And it's true. If I don't go by the laws of what's going to be structurally sound, it's going to fall apart, but I've mastered that and I know how to make it. I love that, the craftsmanship and people who are capable, and they should have that proud feeling. But you can give yourself that proud feeling when you do something that, just take a moment and reflect and say, hey, I did that. Look at how great I am.
Great advice. Well, great advice. It applies to areas way outside of science, to every really area of rational endeavor. Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions, Dylan?
No, sir. That was the last one.
Cool.
Well, I just want to thank Dr. Maxham for joining us. I urge you to check out her work. She has podcasts and essays and articles that she's written on science and government science policy. I urge you to check it out. She's really an important writer in our time. And I just want to thank you all for joining us again for one of these essays.
Oh, thank you for that, James. Yeah, if you check out my newest podcast, it's called Happiest Man Alive. You can find it at happiestpodcast.com.
Thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.